Two teams with plenty of questions face off on Tuesday to start off the Big 12 tournament. Who can possibly make a run? Who will win at least the first game? And who will get an early start for the offseason? Again, which one? With a bunch of questions for each program. This is a special Locked On edition of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Sun Devils.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into a special Locked On crossover edition of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Sun Devils, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay with us for the Armada Team of the Week later in this episode. And unfortunately, Richie, I can tell you that it's not Kansas State. It's not the Sun Devils, but we do have a conversation to talk about because the Big 12 tournament starts on Tuesday, and we face off for the third game of the season between both of us. We took one, you took one. Let's see who wins the rubber match in this one, and we'll get into it. And maybe one of us can make a run for the Big 12 tournament championship and find ourselves in March Madness. I'm not going to hold my breath. I don't know about you, and I'm not really a good swimmer either when it comes to holding breaths, all that good stuff. But regardless, Richie, I think this one should be a really fun matchup. Each of them came down to, well, the first one came down to the wire. The last one, you guys took over pretty well. But before I get your thoughts here, your only win in the last 11 games was against Kansas State in Manhattan. You had a 6-game losing streak, got the win in Manhattan, and then finished the season with a 4-game losing streak. Heading into Kansas City, is there any momentum for the coaching staff, for the players, to possibly try and make this a fun run for Arizona State?
No, there's none of that. This is a team that all year has had a ton of stuff to deal with, and perhaps nothing more has impacted the Sun Devils basketball team than the injuries. I mean, there was a point where one of the games that we had played, I want to say it was against Utah or BYU or something, we had 5 players that were healthy that were on scholarship on the team. Like, they've just got nothing but bad luck all year long. One of the best scorers on the team, who currently is the leading scorer, was dismissed from the program for conduct detrimental to the team, according to Bobby Hurley. And there's been the injuries to Jayden Quaintance, the star freshman who was just named all conference for the freshman team, all defense in the conference. One of our sharpshooters, Joson Sannon, another 5-star freshman, has been up and down. He is heating up as the season, comes to an end. But that was a obstacle for him because he was dealing with a foot injury throughout the year. So it's a team that has not been able to play up to their maximum capacity, because I do look at this team and I see a lot of talent. There's no shortage of ability on this Sun Devils basketball team to play toe-to-toe with anyone. But when you're injured the way you are, and quite frankly, when you have the inadequate coaching of Bobby Hurley, I suppose is what you could call it, they are just unable to maximize this group. And it has led to a very frustrating season for the Sun Devils in more ways than one. But going into the tournament, I don't know if any team has less momentum than the Sun Devils do right now.
That's interesting. Yeah, speaking of the all 12 or Big 12 teams being named for Kansas State, Coleman Hawkins named to the all-third team, and David Gasson named as an honorable mention. I think that's an absolute snub, by the way. I can't believe he wasn't even named to a team. But regardless, I know that it's tough to put yourself on a team when you don't have the type of performance that is expected of you that Kansas State was expected to have this season. You're supposed to be one of the top transfer portal classes coming in, and obviously you turn into a team that's playing on the first day of the tournament. That alone shows you that you did not succeed moving forward. But there's this weird feeling, Richie, that this team can find lightning in a bottle. Lightning can strike twice, if you will, for Kansas State, because they had this moment in time. And let me take you back. And I'm sure you might even know, just being a Big 12 believer like I am, knowing that Kansas State had this 6-game streak of just beautiful basketball where they're defeating teams like Iowa State in Hilton, or they're defeating teams like Kansas. They defeated Arizona, which I know makes you very happy. And
always love that.
They were probably the best team in America at that time, but it was super peaks and valleys. It's been like that all season. They can't find momentum to get themselves to the right spot. Now, they did win 2 of their last 3 games at the end of the season. Can they find a way to have momentum in Kansas City? Can they find a way to make a crazy run to get a bid in March Madness? Again, that's going to be really tough. Now, you mentioned Freeman as your leading scorer, and obviously he was a fantastic player all year long. Going back to that, because I actually really questioned this, because the first game that he was ruled out was the Kansas State game in Manhattan. Was right before that game they said that he's no longer with the team. Did that all stem from the game against Arizona where him and Caleb Love got in it, or was there more to that?
That would be what I would assume was just where everything boiled over. There was a point during the season where Bobby Hurley had said some of the players refused to speak with him after the game and stuff like that. Now, we had nothing confirmed. This is pure speculation. But
Okay.
Based off of that comment and based off of the fact that Freeman was removed from the team for the conduct reasons, I feel like you can probably connect a little bit of dots there. But, I don't know anything for sure. What I do know is that BJ Freeman was a very emotional player. He played with an edge and he played with a passion. And there was a lot of games where he was able to take over for ASU and he looked like a very capable competitor. But unfortunately that's not the most important thing when you're trying to represent a collegiate program. And if it's just not gonna do anything positive for you in a lost season, then you just got to move on. And I hope that BJ Freeman is able to find a new situation and a horizon where he can find success, because he is a talented player, and I think he just was a little emotional, and it's an emotional season. So these things happen, but I got no ill will towards him, and I hope no one else does besides Caleb Love. But quite frankly, I don't really care if Caleb Love feels one way or the other.
I love that. Find a way to get Arizona slander in the show any chance you can. Make that happen. Speaking of Arizona, you talk about the fact that you talk about the fact that Arizona State has these injuries, right? You talk about the fact that Arizona State is dealing with players leaving the team. You have these losing streaks, losing 10 of the last 11 games, but you still find a way to win, or not win, but score points. In the game against Arizona, that final one just a few nights ago, you put up 100 points on the road against the Wildcats, who are ranked in the nation. Mason scoring 33 points. Is that the guy that Kansas State needs to look at to prepare to make sure that he's got to be stopped? There's the other players to look at. I know you don't have any faith in this tournament, and it's hard not to believe in this team after what you've seen over the last season. And I feel the same way in some shape or form about Kansas State with their peaks and valleys. But is Mason the guy that you need to watch out for Kansas State on Tuesday?
I would say so. And this is Sun Devil State. It really is a talented basketball team. And it's such a toxic relationship for me, because I'll be sitting there during the week and I'm bored and I'm like, God, I can't wait for the next ASU basketball game. And then like during the day, I'm like, oh, they play tonight. And then the game starts and I'm like, I hate this. What am I doing? Like, I feel like I'm back with my ex-girlfriend from high school. I'm like, I'm just falling for the same trap over and over again. But Alston Mason has been one of their more consistent guys this year. And over the last month and a half, he has really taken over for this team, and he runs the point and he's able to score from deep. I mean, it feels like he can shoot just about anywhere on the floor, but he's a really good distributor and all sorts of good stuff. You've got a guy in Bashir Jihad who's a big man who knows how to get to the line. He is incredibly good at getting to the stripe. Joson Sanin, that freshman I mentioned earlier, is finally comfortable again with that foot injury, and he's shooting really well. If you're looking for a guy to get that pull-up jumper, Stanton's going to hit that pretty consistently. And there's some other guys to keep an eye out on, Amir Ali, Trevor Story, stuff like that. But yeah, if you're looking for one guy here that K-State needs to put a priority on, it's going to be Alston Mason. He's truly figured it all out. And, Quaintance is more than likely not going to play. If Jayden Quaintance is somehow on the court, and I'm pretty sure he's already been ruled out, if he's somehow out there, it's him. But until then, Alston Mason.
Yeah, I mean, Quaintance was outstanding in the game in Manhattan, in the game that you guys won just a few weeks ago. As of right now, our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook is giving the odds Kansas State a 5.5-point favorite over under 142.5. That's an interesting line. I think getting to 5.5 points in Kansas City against a team that you just lost to just a few days ago. Now, obviously, this is the rubber match, but you mentioned it. You have players leaving. They've lost 10 of the last 11. You got injuries. And on the flip side, Kansas State is bringing back players from injury. Coleman Hawkins just returning, although he's not 100%. You have David Gasson, who has, in my opinion, played lights out basketball. And I think there's a really strong opportunity. He makes sure that team doesn't lose the fight. So, of course, I'm going to lean towards Kansas State. I would not expect you to say the opposite, although you look like you're nodding your head here. Before we head to break, let's go ahead. Let's answer that question. Do you think that Kansas State wins this one, or Arizona State? Excuse me.
Yeah, hold on a second. Hold on.
Yeah, may I never say that again. Arizona State find a way to get the apparent upset, according to our friends at FanDuel.
Arizona State has been a team this year that should have won more games than they did. I looked at this recently on Locked On Sun Devils, and there was 5 games I saw that ASU was very close in for a really close loss, including a 71-70 loss to K-State in Tempe. But there were some other games that went to overtime or were just really high scoring that ASU should have won. They're really good at getting the lead, and then they just surrender it, and it blows my mind. If ASU can find a way to get an early lead over Kansas State and hold on to the lead, like what they were able to do in Manhattan, they had a really huge lead at one point in time. If they can find a way to just not squander that kind of a lead, they can win the game. I've seen way too much evidence at this point in time during the season that I don't know if I trust or believe that they can do that right now.
6 o'clock Central Time, 4 p.m. Pacific Time is when the tip-off happens on Tuesday between Arizona State and Kansas State. But regardless of this, whoever loses, whoever wins, and if both teams don't win the Big 12 tournament, there's no March Madness for either of these two programs. But there are plenty of questions still to be answered for the Sun Devils, for Kansas State. Is your head coach in the hot seat? What does the transfer portal bring? And there are some other postseason tournaments. Maybe these guys can find a way in. Let's talk about that more right here on a special crossover edition of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Sun Devils. The Armada Team of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan, the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. And each week, our Locked On college basketball experts are picking one team that stands apart, from top-seeded stars to the unexpected upsets. These guys showcase the strength and sheer power needed to push the team forward. This week's Armada clear-cut Team of the Week are the Duke Blue Devils. The Blue Devils were plus 434 points in ACC games, the largest point differential by a power conference team in league play since Kentucky in 1953 and the 1954 season. When it comes to Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer. And that's exactly what the Duke Blue Devils have done here. It's a clear cut that this Team of the Week is out there and ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can with the all-new Nissan Armada or any of the Nissan's outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. And thank you for making Locked On your first listen today. We really appreciate that. For your second listen of the day, check out Locked On College Basketball with Isaac Shiade and Andy Patton. March is here. There's no doubt about it. We are in championship week. We are about to hit March Madness. The madness is here. Okay, folks. So be the most informed college basketball fan throughout the madness. Find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We're talking Arizona State, Kansas State, the first game of the Big 12 tournament for these two teams on Tuesday in Kansas City. And I know we've seen this on social media as well. It needs to stay in Kansas City. This tournament does not need to go to Vegas. I know that'd be closer to you. I know that you're coming from the Pac-12. You've seen that before, but this is an amazing tournament in Kansas City. We filled the seats. It's more Iowa State than any other, to be honest with you, which kills me. Iowa State travels well to this tournament, but it's got to stay there. I think this has been it's been at this spot for a very long time. It's been there for quite some time, and you can't change it. And I wanted to address that now. I know that we've heard some thoughts about it maybe going to Las Vegas, or it should go. Absolutely not. Don't let that happen. Let's go back on this. We are digging into, obviously, some more questions here because it is quite likely, obviously, a guarantee for one of our programs starting on Tuesday, but it's quite likely for both of these teams that they are not going to go dancing in the NCAA tournament. One of these teams has to win the entire Big 12 tournament to make that happen. The odds are against us. It's just, let's keep this straight. We know that for a fact. We're at the bottom of the Big 12 standings. That's why we're playing in the first round on Tuesday. There are a couple other postseason tournaments, though, that could be played. There's the NIT, and there's this new one called the Crown that Fox is holding. A really interesting tournament, in my opinion, which the Big 12 will have some bids involved in that. Now, that one doesn't start until around the Final Four starts, which also means that the transfer portal is happening when that is occurring. With the success of our programs right now, and with the transfer portal coming up, let's focus more on the postseason side, not the portal side for this type of the conversation, at least initially. Do you want to play in the postseason if you're Arizona State?
I'd say so. I mean, in the 10 years of Bobby Hurley, ASU has been 10. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy. I remember when he was at Buffalo.
Yeah. Did you know that he's the all-time assist leader in the NCAA? Pretty crazy, right? Yeah.
That is crazy.
I feel like I never hear that on any broadcast that I tune into that has Bobby Hurley and the Sun Devils. But, crazy.
I feel like that's a joke.
Yes, exactly. Just like during football season, every time you turned on Alabama, they're like, Ryan Williams is 17. You're like, yeah, I know. I listened to last week's show.
Yeah, of course, that one. That's a good one. Yeah, if it's on ESPN Plus, I've been doing myself a favor and hitting mute lately, but
no kidding. They just have not had any postseason success with Hurley. They've been to the tournament 3 times, technically. They've gone to the first 4 out all 3 times. They're 2-1 there. They have not won a game in the round of 64. There's just no success with this program. It's all that we want is to be able to get there and have some fun. The one thing I want to see in my lifetime is a trip to the Sweet 16. That would be the coolest thing in the world for me. But at this point, just getting to the tournament, and with a season like this where you're 13-18, if you make the tournament, it means that you just went on this unbelievable run to end the season, which probably would mean you have to win the conference. And that would, oh my God, that would go right to my head, let alone everybody else. But this definitely just feels like a lost season. I don't see any way that ASU is able to even sniff any of these tournaments. I would love to, just because of how talented this team is. And I don't want to feel like we wasted this talent, but you just got to call what it is at this point.
Yeah, let me tell you about deep tournament runs, because I have just, a couple of years ago, Kansas State went all the way to the Elite Eight. It is a great feeling. It is an absolutely great feeling to watch your team do that. And I hope you have the opportunity to do that at some point, because it really is a super fun experience. Because I think that this is the best tournament in all American sports. Like, I really do. I really think, like, even if you're not a college basketball fan, everybody and their mother fills out a bracket, right? You don't know that, with the exception of the Super Bowl, like, no other people do that. Like, no other people tune in the way they do for a sporting event. It's really, really interesting. And then being able to be that team that makes that run, whether you're a Cinderella team or a favorite, doesn't matter. We were a 3 seed when we went to the Elite Eight, but it still was super cool. Talking about this, though, the NIT, the Crown, NIT, I feel like that might be phased out if the Crown succeeds. We'll see how that works. But the way that I feel with Kansas State is that if you can find a way to have this buy-in, and Jerome Tang is really focused on this whole buy-in thing. He's trying to rebuild this culture after missing the tournament last year and looking like obviously going to miss the tournament this year. If you can make sure you have that buy-in and keep the good core of players, something that could be a concern with the transfer portal opening up before the Crown even starts, then I think you should play. And I think you should accept the bid, or if you have no choice, obviously play. But last year in the NIT, it didn't feel like Kansas State was all there, if you will. You know, people were obviously getting ready to leave for the portal, already leaving for the portal, whatever the case may be. It didn't have the same feeling of, okay, this team wants to be here. And again, that's let down expectations of not making the tournament after being in the Elite Eight the year prior. But it's just, if you have that, if that's what you're going to give me in a few weeks, then I don't want it. I don't want it. I would rather focus on the offseason, focus on some new offers and new commits that just came in the freshman class, and start building it up the way that you need to moving forward. That's my thought process on postseason, with the exception of the NCAA tournament. If you want to bring it all, and if it's something that's a positive benefit to build on the culture, and I think you and I can both kind of discuss that, because right now you're in a spot where you have to kind of rebuild the culture. I mean, any team at the bottom of a conference has to find a way to rebuild something, right? So
Right.
That's where I'm put on there. Now, on the flip side, Jerome Tang's not going anywhere. One, his buyout is massive. It is insane. And I think he has the athletic department on his side as well. And for the record, I know that we kind of gauge things in the media world here because we get our news from a computer. We're talking through a computer. So I think that we also gauge the overall fan view of what social media is saying. I don't think that the majority of fans are upset at Jerome Tang because of these two disappointing seasons. Let's call it what it is. I think there's a longer leash than what the people on social media are leading it off to be. So I'm not too worried about saying that Coach Tang is going to be the coach for Kansas State for the next couple seasons. On the flip side, can you say the same about the Sun Devils? Because everywhere I look, you go to On3, you go to ESPN, there's this new aggregate article popping up saying the top coaches in the hot seat. And one of the pictures, one of the people in the thumbnail is Bobby Hurley.
I don't know what to do with it, because it feels like this hot seat has been here way too long. And it feels like the time to make that change was a long time ago. But they just haven't made the change for one reason or another. And with a new athletic director in town with Graham Rossini, this is his first athletic season that he's been able to put together. And we've seen good success. ASU has won, I think, 3 different sports titles in the Big 12, which includes the football team. And the basketball team was supposed to be a more than competent group. They were not able to do that this year. So is this going to be the trend moving forward? Is it time to make the move? I don't know. What I do know is that there's a lot of changes coming in the near future. They finally announced renovations for the basketball arena, which has been stuck in the 90s forever. I have said demolish it because of how run down it is. So they're finally investing in that. There is NIL that's coming in. The former NBA MVP and ASU standout James Harden has said, look, if it's an NIL problem at ASU, then I will be the one to fix it. So there's going to be some NIL that's continuing to grow for the program, and Bobby Hurley's been one of the biggest proponents of that. Are you willing to nuke everything and just completely start fresh for a program that I don't know who wants to come here, outside of the fact that you're one of the biggest colleges in the world and you have a lot of resources at your disposal? Or do you retain Hurley? One of the things that I look at, if Hurley's gone, there's a lot of players who could come back to this team next year that will not come back. This will be an entirely different roster, and that could be a good thing. Or you could look at it and be like, there's a lot of 5 stars, 4 stars, and good recruits that are coming in. I'm good with running it back for one more season. That's kind of the argument that you see either way. But what happens next for ASU basketball starting tomorrow, starting on Wednesday, it's going to be really, really interesting to see.
Yeah, I want to dig more into this transfer portal talk because there are a scenario where multiple teams or multiple players could leave both of these programs. And if that's the case, what happens? And then, of course, I want to get your thoughts on the entire tournament, right? Who are some Cinderella teams? Who are your favorites? And not just the Big 12 tourney, but NCAA tournament as well. We don't get a chance to talk that much. So let's do that to finish up this special crossover edition of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Sun Devils. Attention Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Sun Devil fans, ever wish you could directly support your favorite school's athletes and be a part of the journey? Well, now you can with Roy, the NIL app that puts fans in control. Before Roy, NIL deals were often handled behind closed doors, and fans like you didn't have a clear-cut way to directly support the players you love. Well, guess what? Now with Roy, you can make a real impact and feel closer to the athletes representing either Kansas State, Arizona State, or anyone in the Big 12. With Roy, you can get to choose the players you want to support, decide how much you want to contribute, and get exclusive content straight for the athletes you back. The best part about it, and I really love this, if a player transfers, we're getting close to the transfer portal, you get your money back. So it's a risk-free way to show your support and make your voice heard. Support your favorite players directly and help shape the future of your program in your sports of either Kansas State or Arizona State. Download the Roy app now and from the App Store and start backing your program and program's athletes the way they deserve with transparency, trust, and real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. March is such a fun month. When we are just building up for college basketball, it'd be a lot more fun, obviously, if we were sitting waiting for these teams to come play us as the 1 or 2 seed in Kansas City, but that's not the case. Kansas State and Arizona State taking on each other on Tuesday in round 1 of the Big 12 tournament. They got a long ways to go if they want to find it themselves to become, quite frankly, a bid stealer and make it into the March Madness tournament. It's possible. Anything can happen. Go ahead and quote the Angels in the outfield, the little kid flapping his wings in the stands saying, hey, it can happen. But don't hold your breath, folks. We're also talking about some other questions and concerns about both of these programs heading into the offseason. We talked about the potential of Bobby Hurley being on the hot seat. Jerome Tang, I don't think is going anywhere. And the transfer portal. And that's what I want to dig into next, is transfer portal, because I think there's some big concerns on each side. Kansas State utilized the transfer portal so much last year, where they built in, to some media outlets, were seen as the number 2 transfer portal class in the entire nation. It didn't work out. Does that mean they avoid it completely? Oh, I sure hope not, because you got to find a way to retool one way or the other. Now, I don't think that they should go all in to that route, because they have to find a way to build a nucleus. They kind of blew up the core last year. They let everybody go elsewhere, and that's why they had to bring in so many players, and that's why they were seen as a top portal class, because they brought in so much talent. You got to find a way to keep those moving forward. With the exception of David Gasson and Coleman Hawkins, everybody is eligible to return if a D2 waiver comes in for a guy like Max Jones. Now, if everybody can return, that's great. I don't know if Jerome Tang and his coaching staff want everybody to return, but if you can get 4 or 5 or 6 or potentially even 8 players back, bring in a couple of those freshmen that just committed, some really exciting freshmen that just committed as well, and then just pick 1 or 2 players in the transfer portal to fill the needs that you missed out on Gasson and Hawkins, maybe build up more on a Doug McDaniel, a point guard play as well. Who knows? I think that's what you need. Jerome Tang has pushed this, and let me know what you think about this as well. Jerome Tang has pushed this narrative over his pressers the last couple of weeks, and really ever since they had a loss to Houston. And everybody's lost to Houston this year. They're a really good basketball team. And he's talked about the Houston model in recruiting, Richie, where they bring back and they retain the most players. I think over 80% of their players stay with Houston that are not eligible to go to the draft or graduate. They bring them back and then they just retool with 1 or 2, either from the portal or the freshman class. But that retention is the key thing for being successful, not only the Big 12, but in the entire country. How does a program like Kansas State and Arizona State get that retention so they can get back to being competitive?
That's the biggest question that we're facing right now is it really revolves around Bobby Hurley. If Hurley is back, I truly think that the vast majority of this roster is going to return. And the roster is not the problem. It's not the problem because we've seen several of these guys stand out and show their potential. I mean, Jayden Quaintance was one of the top 10 recruits in the nation. And when he was healthy, you're sitting there and you're like, yeah, I see it. He has to play 2 years of collegiate basketball because he reclassified as someone who's not going to be 18 before the NBA draft starts. Yeah, if you thought the Ryan Williams thing was annoying for Alabama football, it was just as bad when Jayden Quaintance was playing basketball for ASU. Do you know this kid's 17? Yeah, it's just, I get it. Can I watch the game kind of thing? But there's a good chance he returns. Joson Sannon had previously said, I am going to be one and done. I'm declaring for the draft. I have a very, very good feeling that he is considering returning because of the injuries this year that plagued him, and his play was way too erratic. He's not a first-round pick right now for the draft. Come back, be healthy, and then move on from there. He was a top 25 to top 30 recruit. And you've got several other good young players. There's a veteran guy in Sean Phillips Jr. He's your big man. He will have one more year of eligibility back. You bring back the core of those guys and then attack the transfer portal and hopefully get a couple of guys through the recruiting class because Bobby Hurley's never been a bad recruiter. That's never been his issue. Right. For the top 25 highest rated recruits since it was tracked, according to 24/7, of the top 25, he has 17 or 18 of those top 25 in 10 years.
Impressive.
Which includes 3 5-stars and several 4-stars who were bordering on 5 stars, depending on where you look. Like, he can recruit. So if he can put together another good recruiting class and land some transfers and stay healthy, that really was something that didn't help Hurley this year. And injuries are important and injuries matter. I don't like making that the biggest excuse for a team because you should be able to coach a team through that or have the depth to be able to get through it. ASU was ravaged this year. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't a problem, but that all changes. If Hurley is fired, like I previously said, I don't think anyone's back. I think every single player on this roster is gone because there's a lot of seniors who are leaving. Alston Mason, BJ Freeman, if he had stayed with the program, Bashir Jihad and Adam Miller, who were 4 of your 5 starters at the beginning of the season, are all seniors. They're gone. You could lose Sannon. You could lose Quaintance. You could lose your other 2 freshmen, Amir Ali and Trevor Best. Sean Phillips Jr. could be gone. Like, I'm talking about 9 players right there who are significant guys for your team, let alone some of the guys who didn't play this year very much, like Austin Nunez. Like, this could be an entirely different team. And then it depends who you bring in. Are you going to be able to get a slightly big name coach, or is Richie Bradshaw going to get a phone call here in a little bit and say, hey man, do you know how to coach basketball? And I'll be like, yeah, I know what the orange ball is. I can do that. And see how that person can recruit. It's all going to depend on what happens on Wednesday. I truly believe, because one, I say Wednesday because I think ASU is losing tonight. Right, wrong, or indifferent. If Bobby Hurley is retained, I would be very confident, I truly would, that majority of this team would be back. And if he is gone, I would be even more confident in that nobody will return.
Strap in. If that happens, I mean, strap in for like one of the biggest rebuilds, and it's going to take some time. I mean, you just said it right there, and it makes you wonder, like you just had to deal with a rough season right now. What kind of season, what kind of patience are Arizona State fans going to have for the new coach after dealing with 10 years of Bobby Hurley, if that happens again? Okay, I want to get your March Madness thoughts real quick, but out of all those possibilities, let's say that the crazy things happen, people leave for the portal, whatever the case may be, what is the one player who must be held at all costs this offseason? Is it Quaintance?
Oh, yeah, it's definitely going to be Jayden Quaintance. I mean, the highest rated recruit in the history of the program. If he were to be eligible for this year's draft, he still would have been a first-round pick. He was teetering on 10 points a game, but he set ASU's freshman blocks record and missed, God, I want to say like 9 games or something like that. When he was on the court, he was just a difference maker. He came into the year listed at 6'9", 230, and there was some belief he wasn't done growing yet. And I mean, as a 17-year-old kid, yeah, there is the possibility maybe he's got another inch or two to get a little taller. Maybe he can bulk up a little bit, but the upside with him is as high as anybody in the nation with just the pure traits that he has. And then what you were able to see on the court from him this year. To me, there is just no way that you can let him go. But there is one thing that he has previously stated that has me nervous. And he has stated, I want to be the number 1 overall pick in a future NBA draft. And I sit here as an ASU fan and I go, I don't know if we're the place to do that. And if he enters the transfer portal, every single team, every single program in the country will give him a call. And when you get a call from Auburn, when you get a call from Kentucky and Duke and Kansas and anywhere else in the country with some of the best programs, Alabama is really good right now. They're going to call you, Houston, and you're going to say, yeah, I would love to go there. I've seen the success that you've had recently, and I know that I can become a superstar there. I do whatever I can to keep him in Tempe. And with NIL slowly getting better and better, if it means throwing 7 figures at him, 8 figures at him, I don't care. Like, right, wrong, or indifferent, think whatever you want about NIL. If it means keeping Jayden Quaintance, let's do it, man. I will give you some of my salary, I guess. I don't know. What do we got to do?
Hey, everybody's doing it now, so you got it. It's an adapt or die situation, no doubt.
Is he on the Roy app? I got to take a look and see if he's on Roy.
That's right. Speaking of Roy and speaking of our other partner of today, the Nissan Team of the Week, the Duke Blue Devils. You mentioned them. You mentioned Kansas. You mentioned Auburn. Those are some of the favorites, not Kansas, but Duke and Auburn are some of the favorites heading into the March Madness tournament. Who do you like? And maybe who is a possible Cinderella or sleeper, maybe like a team not mentioned, to win it all this year?
Honestly, I haven't done too much research yet to be able to give you a definitive sleeper at this time. Okay. I'm just not 100% sure, but I do know that the Big Ten has had some sneaky good teams this year. I know that Michigan and Michigan State just had a really big game. Yeah. I know that the SEC is absolutely loaded with Bama and Auburn. Right now, I don't like picking 1 seeds, and I'm pretty sure that not only will Auburn be a 1 seed, they'll probably be the number 1 seed overall. It's hard to pick against them right now. Obviously, Cooper Flagg is amazing, the rookie of the year in the ACC and all that good stuff. But I just don't know if anyone can compete with what Auburn is doing at the moment. We'll see. I know Maryland has also been a team that's been a bit surprising this year too. Like the Big Ten just has a lot of teams that you need to pay attention to. Wisconsin has been a sneaky good team. We'll have to wait and see. I could see a team from the Big Ten find a way to make a really big run this year.
Be interesting to see if Izzo can make a run. Haven't seen that happen in quite some time. And going to make our good friend Zach Blackerby happy over at Locked On Auburn for talking about things. But I'm with you. Auburn looks really good as well. I want to see the path of St. John's. If the path for St. John's looks good, I kind of like them for a favorite. They're not going to be a 1 seed by any means, but what they've done this year has been quite interesting. And speaking of all the NIL and transfer portals and things, Patino's came out and said he's not even looking at high school recruits. So crazy to see that and what's moving forward this offseason and everything. I mean, the aspects of college basketball and college athletics in general are just changing by the moment. And we're going to make sure that we always have you covered here anywhere you listen to a Locked On podcast. Speaking of that, Richie, where can everyone find you over at Locked On Sun Devils?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Richie Brads with a Z 36. The podcast is there at LO_Sun Devils. The podcast is available wherever you get your podcast, whether that's a visual platform like YouTube or audio like, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, all that good stuff. Definitely, give me a shout. Love talking ball. Love talking smack to U of A. And a shout out to U of A for your inevitable loss in the round of 32. The basketball school, as you like to call yourselves. Yeah. Congrats. You haven't been relevant in forever, but that's coming from an ASU fan.
I love that.
Take it for what it's worth.
Yes. You can find Kansas State at Locked On Kansas State anywhere you listen to your podcast and on Twitter X at Locked On K-State. That'll do it for this episode. Please like the video. Please subscribe. And this has been a special crossover edition of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Sun Devils.